Welcome to the Passive Wealth Principles episode on what I learned. This episode is about Christian Mack. Christian Mack is somebody I interviewed a few months ago, and the insights that he shares are timeless. One of the things that we get a chance to talk about is how he bootstrapped his startup company in the late 90s. What he did was that startup company was, he did the metaphorical, building up the company and the organization from just hiring people and bringing them into his house. I think he said at one point he had like 15 or 18 different people living out of his house and kind of house hacking. They were sleeping in the basement, sleeping, 2, 3, 4 people to a room, and they were collectively coding and programming and just kind of growing. And the first year that they ever went out there and had his own company, they did $1 million in revenue. Through that process, he learned a lot of interesting things. He made a lot of trial and error, and especially getting to that $1 million revenue. He then determined, and which became kind of his methodology for enterprise software, was there's these certain milestones that you have in your existence of as a company. First, getting that first $1 million revenue, 7 figures. Then what happens? There's a next big milestone of $2.5 million, and then you kind of plateau and have a sticking point. And then it's to 8 figures, getting it to $10 million, and then from $10 million to $50 million. So each one of those sequential kind of revenue numbers has different things that you need to understand and mechanisms that you need to create around your business, systems that you need to layer in, employees you need to hire, the expansion of your company. And so he did that by just doing this himself. And so even though his company, this enterprise software program that he created, hit $1 million initially, it was because he was tapping into, in the late 1990s, in 1999, there's a huge concern about like Y2K, that computers would just all shut off when it went to the year 2000. And so he was able to structure and create a lot of business models around a very basic kind of component of enterprise software. That obviously grew significantly over the years, and then ultimately led to a 9-figure exit for himself. Awesome. So you're done. 9 figures. You make, into the hundreds of millions of dollars. So you retire, of course. No, not really. As most people that I've been around that have had levels of success and had these multi-million-dollar exits, there may be some transition time period where they rest and sit back and relax for a little while. But the reality is that they love building stuff. They're creators. And so Christian, like many of these other people, sat down, took these skill sets that he'd learned in growing his company, and then created his own family office. One of the things that we talk about on there is family offices. Like, what are family offices? This is actually something that I discussed on the show and years ago, probably 5-6 years ago. I didn't even know what a family office was. And actually, I was at this event speaking, and this guy said, "Oh, I'm part of a single family office." Someone else said, "Oh, yes, I'm a manager for a multi-family office." And I just kind of looked there and I took a note. Was like, well, I don't want to seem stupid, so I'm not going to ask what is a family office. Well, ultimately what it is that, it's a rich person. And Christian explains it in the episode, is oftentimes like you have certain levels of wealth, you can hand that off to, JP Morgan, you can hand that off to Wells Fargo or Morgan Stanley or someone else to manage your money. Well, alternatively, some of these people say, I just want to hire those things in-house. I want to hire my own chief investment officer or a fractional chief investment officer. I'm going to hire someone that helps diversify and underwrite and look at deals for me. And so oftentimes the best deals are not in the public markets. They're not on the publicly traded stock exchange. They're in private deals. They're in alternative investments. They're in direct investments into VC funds or private equity funds or real estate funds. And and Christian and I happen to be in a mastermind group that we've got a chance to spend a handful of times together. And in those groups, these deals kind of get passed around. They get shared. They get talked about. They get, the collective brain power of the organization will maybe look at it and say good, bad, or indifferent. So those deals are typically not out to the general public. And so that's why he was able to take his 9-figure exit and then be able to create his own kind of family office. And what happens is from that creating of that family office, he was around really, really smart people. And obviously in the 2000s, when he was, planning this exit, that there was nobody that gave that information. I'm about ready to have a 9-figure exit. What do I do? And so what he did is he just interviewed lots of law firms, some of the best people in the world in, tax law, and some of the best attorneys in, accounting law, and the best people in operations. And he just started spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to these attorneys, thinking like, with figuring out all of these things, I will, or talking to all of these people collectively, I may be able to, gather and glean some information that'll be most beneficial. They happened to introduce him to the guy that was a chairman of this bank in Southern California. They happened to be using his conference room, and that guy turned into a mentor. And so we talk about how mentors have created monumental leaps forward because they're able to kind of see the macro perspective of where you're heading. And it's not like they're keeping you accountable. Most mentors aren't saying, do this, now do this, or do that. What they're oftentimes doing is just asking the right questions, putting the right spin on things, while saying, well, maybe I wouldn't have done it that way, but have you looked at it this, or how would you ever think of it in a different way? And so mentors are able to just cause you to think outside of your own experiences. And so that's one of the things that we get to dive into in this episode, is how masterminds, how mentors, how people that you pay lots of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars to, can really 10x what you can do. While Christian spent $200 or hundreds of thousands of dollars in attorney fees, that equated to tens of millions of dollars in tax savings by the way he ultimately structured his exit. We didn't go into some of those details, but how a dynasty trust is something that is unbelievable, and why the rich are getting richer is because they're spending this money on these collective brain power and this financial IQ. They don't have to know everything themselves, but they just figure and reach out that somebody out there knows more about this than they do. So that's, so powerful as far as connecting up with these mentors, being part of these mastermind programs, and really getting to share some of these life experiences. And goes back to also that, like I said earlier, just because you have a big exit doesn't mean you now get to sit on a beach for the rest of your life. Well, Christian could, and many other people I know could, because they have certain levels of passive wealth or income that's well in excess of their burn rate or their mortgages or payments. They choose to continue to work. Christian's now taking his family office and turned it into what is a Lotus fund. Lotus fund invest into these, post-revenue, or like these revenue, enterprise software programs. And he's taking them and buying them between, they're at $1 to $10 million in revenue, and then taking them and then to the next level. And many times he'll buy them at 2-3 times their revenue numbers. And then when he is done sprucing them up, value add, fixing and flipping them, they're worth, 5, 7, 8, 10, 15, 20 times the revenue multiple. So not only are they increasing the revenues, but they're also trading them at a much more significant revenue multiple. So for instance, he invested into a company February of last year That company a year later IPO'd on the Canadian Stock Exchange, and I think it was trading when it IPO'd at 15 times revenue. They purchased it somewhere around the 2 to 3 times. So just simply by doing that, had they kept the same revenue, there would be a significant return on their investment. And this is because he's really niched down into one specific category of post-revenue enterprise SaaS programs. So he can evaluate those. Those are oftentimes off-market. People are sending them directly to him. He's able to put together the systems that scale that. What I mean by that and in systems is, a CEO that is really good as a technologist has created a program that has solved a particular niche and a need that's maybe gone up to $1 million, maybe $2 million in revenue, but they don't have the understanding of how to run an enterprise sales team. They don't understand the back office plumbing mechanisms that you need to put into your business to take it, to that $5 and $10 million revenue numbers, and then especially from 10 to 50 million. So they're really good at the problem that they've solved, similar to real estate where location matters. Enterprise software and SaaS software, the product really matters. It's similar to that location. So once that product's good, it has a good product, oftentimes the businesses are not successful because the other parts are, not doing well. So just as in real estate, we would go in and fix up some of the components, put new facades on or reconfigure the layouts, convert the use to something else. That's what Christian does with these companies and his Lotus fund. I think they've had more than 30 exits so far, and it is just a vastly different world than most venture capital when they're trying to invest into everything being 10 or 20x returns, especially in pre-seed and pre-revenue investments. That's not what he's doing. I find it very fascinating every time I get a chance to talk to Christian, every time I get to hang out with him. His knowledge base is just his financial IQ and his overall IQ is mesmerizing. I love sitting around him. He is very clever and witty. And honestly, I could spend hours and hours talking to Christian. And so this is just a really short snippet of information. And I feel like it is a blessing to get access to him and understanding of the way he structured some of these things. So please if you get a chance, dive into the full episode of Christian Mack on passive wealth principles. Thank you and happy investing.